You already need it. Good evening and welcome to Overtime. Once again here on WOTM, I am Gerhard Mathangani, joined by our traditional Wednesday night guest and our expert historian / researcher, Mark Everett Kelly. Mark will have a lot of football talk. Today is obviously National Signing Day. Teams in the SEC, both Alabama and Auburn, making some big waves today. We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll also get into a little NFL in the minute as well. But let's first start in college basketball. It's a big night both for Alabama and Auburn last night. Both playing non-conference games still, a conference scheduled play scheduled for about a little over 4 or 5 weeks from now before we get into the very, very deep SEC. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Alabama goes on the road and loses at Memphis. This is the number 6 team in the country. They give up 92 points in a 92-78 loss against Memphis. It was a talented team, but they were struggling going into that basketball game. What were your takeaways from last night as the Crimson Tide now fall to 8-2?
Generally, you don't see Alabama play that poor defensively. They're usually a lot better defensively. They usually held their opponents to a lot lower field goal percentage. But you got to understand what Memphis was playing for coming into that game. They had lost 4 straight games. They were supposed to be ranked heading into the year and high expectations out of their great recruiting class. They've lost a lot of close games. They got blown out by Iowa State in one of the games. So they came into this game seeing the number 6 team in the nation with a mark on them, saying, okay, if we're going to make anything out of our season, this is where we got to come to play. And you saw just by the way they were able to penetrate and make Alabama a little susceptible to penetration, then kick out for the 3-point shot. They shot the ball pretty well. They pretty much dominated on the offensive board, 17-11 on second shots, where Alabama had played much better during the year. They out-rebounded Alabama 33-31, and like I said, 17-11. That was a big part of that game, is some of those second shots that normally Alabama holds to just one, and then they're able to come down and get a basket. So I thought those couple things were huge in their loss. And when you add that, Ellis, Quinterly, and Shackelford, 15 for 37 combined, is a little bit lower. 40% for them is a little bit lower than what they get during the regular season. Most of the time, they're 52%, which is what they got of the offense. Those 3 contribute for 52% of Alabama's offense, which they did in this game, is enough. But when they shoot that lower percentage, and then 10 for 33 from the 3-point line, again, Alabama's got to be a little bit higher. You want it to be about like 38-40% for the game. They weren't. The couple losses they have this year was consistent in their points scored. They scored under 80 points in both of those losses. Same thing with here tonight. I thought Memphis played well defensively, but again, Alabama normally getting more limiting second shot opportunities gives them more offensive possessions. They didn't have that, which is why there was a little bit differential in only scoring 78 points to where they've entered the game 7th in the NCAA, 1st in the SEC, 86 points per game.
Exactly. Between the two of these options, which one do you think it more is? Because this is for Alabama's one of their first true road games in the SEC. A blip in the radar or cause for concern?
Blip in the radar.
Okay, blip in the radar.
Blip in the radar.
So you're not worried about Alabama on the road moving forward,
no.
Like you said, with that small number by their name, because the more that they get, the reason why the crowd was what it was is because the number 6 team in the country is coming to their building.
Exactly. They got to understand that now they are going to be a target.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they got last year with the great season they had last year. Again, you have the SEC champions coming into your building.
Right.
All right? You don't have the 5th team. You don't got Tennessee.
True.
Or you don't got Ole Miss. Not that there's anything wrong with Tennessee or Ole Miss.
Right.
But they're not coming into Memphis. And when you've played as poorly as Memphis has played this year, and your season's on the line, you come out with something to play for. Like Nick Saban said in his press conference, the really dangerous team isn't the one that comes in on a win streak. It's the one that comes in on a losing streak. And they got to fight for their season.
Exactly. Next up for Alabama, they'll take on Jacksonville State. That game is coming up on Saturday, 7:30 on the SEC Network. Jacksonville State also playing tonight against Florida International, so it should be a really good in-state battle between the Tide and the Gamecocks there. Meanwhile, the Auburn Tigers, we don't have video of this one, but we'll talk about it for just a little bit. The Auburn Tigers played against North Alabama and got a win 70-44. The only reason, or one of the reasons why it's important, is Auburn's now a top 15 team. Bruce Pearl, their head coach, served a 2-game suspension. And in the 2-game suspension that he served, Auburn won both basketball games. Stephen Pearl served as the interim coach last night. Auburn not necessarily affected by the off-court things. Is this a sign of really good things to come for the Auburn Tigers, or is it just, hey, they played inferior opponents in both games against Nebraska and North Alabama?
I wouldn't say Nebraska was necessarily an inferior opponent. I mean, they're a Big Ten school. You know that they're going to be pretty good during the regular season,
right.
And especially in non-conference play. You want to have as many wins as you can against like power schools. But South Alabama, you figure that they should.
North Alabama.
Oh, no,
yeah, because South Alabama's really good.
I apologize to North Alabama.
Yeah, South Alabama's really good this year.
Yeah, I apologize. Anyway. But going into the game, I think Auburn, because of the head coaching thing, probably people thought, well, are they going to show that they are susceptible to anything? Maybe, Bruce Pearl's son isn't going to communicate as well with the players, but they struggled in the first half, and then they opened up like a 27-4 run to start the second half. They started getting out more, making easy shots, and I think that was the key for them winning. How that really prescribes to this year in the SEC. Remember last year they were 13-14.
Yep.
They didn't have that good a year. You figure they're going to be better this year. The way they're playing so far, they're shooting very well from three-point range. They're one of the best teams in the SEC. And they also really defend well, and they create a lot of turnovers.
Exactly.
And so I think if Auburn's able to do that consistently throughout league play, Auburn's going to be right back up there challenging Alabama for the West. And then the real beast, though, is Kentucky in the East. LSU, I think, can make some noise in the West, too. I'm really good at love that little rivalry with Will Wade and Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl, because they really don't like each other. So that's going to be fun to see. And it's just going to add to a very exciting, very competitive, very deep SEC.
Exactly, and you teed that up perfectly. Let's take a look at those SEC standings going into this week's games. The number 14, of all 14 teams, 6 of them are ranked in the top 25. This is the SEC standings overall. You see all the teams that have 8-9 wins already on the year. A lot of these teams will vie for spots in the big dance. Some of your early takeaways, I know not every team has played the same level of schedule, so not necessarily Alabama's played a very tough schedule and played very well against a tough schedule. Some of the things that you're looking at early on here in the SEC.
Well, just take Georgia, for example. Georgia beat Missouri,
That's
Memphis.
right. Yeah.
Okay, so they're 4-5, and I think sometimes when you play rough non-conference schedules, and Georgia's kind of still growing into who they could be in the SEC East. And they don't really have that great of a basketball tradition at Georgia. Dominique Wilkins, I guess, could be part of that. But they're not known like a power like Kentucky or even South Carolina in the late 90s when they won 15 and wound up winning the SEC. So I think that Georgia still got a little way to go. But overall, you look at Florida 7-3. Florida's going to be competitive.
For sure.
That Ole Miss is probably going to be a little bit better than they were the last couple of years. And Mississippi State, they're still struggling to reach what exactly they can be in the SEC. So, but you have the strong teams in the West like Arkansas, Auburn, Alabama, and then the East, Tennessee, Kentucky, and South Carolina is going to be better this year than they've been. But also, you got to remember South Carolina, maybe 4 or 5 years ago made the Final Four.
For sure,
so they're capable of jumping up and having a really good year. But how competitive the West is going to be. You got LSU, Arkansas, Auburn, Alabama right there. First 4 teams, all West teams. Going to be really exciting to see that division with teams that really don't like each other either.
Exactly. Also really well coached in the case really of all 4
well,
of those.
I don't know about LSU.
Of all 4 of those teams, with Will Wade, that's a debatable thing. But they got a really talented basketball team once again this year. Well, speaking of talent, today is National Signing Day in high school football. The future of college football being written today in the early signing period. A race for the top teams as far as the overall signings. We'll have some great big-time prospects here in the state signing. We'll have some video of that coming your way next year on Overtime.